So I'm just wetting my canvas now and adding a little bit of gesso, getting this nice and wet, and this way I am able to better move my paint around. I'm adding some purple and crimson with a little bit of burnt umber, and then trying just to kind of get the right hand side of the canvas in the lower portion a little bit darker. Adding some carbon black here. I want to really get that grayed out nice and dark. Adding a little more purple. And just kind of generally trying to create kind of a purplish crimson sort of backlit background here for our little Dobby bust that we're going to be putting together here. This is actually a commission painting, and the client is a big Harry Potter fan, so requested this Dobby. So I've gone ahead now and I've just drawn out a basic outline of Dobby. And now I'm just adding a little bit of charcoal gray that I've mixed together here just to kind of underpaint Dobby's tunic that he's wearing, or actually it's really more of a pillowcase that he's wearing since he's not supposed to have clothing. Anyway, that's kind of his symbol of servitude. I'm going to start in the eyes now. So I've gone ahead and pre-mixed my palette. I've used my 5 basic colors. This time I'm using Van Dyke Brown, Ultramarine Blue, Cad Red, Cad Yellow, and Titanium White. And then I've gone ahead and mixed my yellow and blue to kind of create a green. Since Dobby's eyes are going to be a little bit on the green side, I've kind of pre-mixed a bit of a green. So I'm just adding kind of a charcoal gray here into the eyes, the white of the eyes anyway. You don't want to use pure white. There's a lot of shadow in the eyes. I've added a little bit of blue as well, just to kind of cool that up a bit. And just now just trying to kind of start working the iris here now in kind of green tones, moving into some blues, and then some lighter greens. But I like starting in the eyes. I think that's the best region, at least for me, as I do any sort of character painting or portrait painting. I like to kind of work in the center of the face, usually around the eyes, and then start kind of expanding out from that into the eyebrow region and around the eyes, and then on into the nose and forehead and so forth. So this is pretty typical for me. But I'm just kind of using this pre-mixed palette that I've put together here. And I kind of will pre-mix on the palette, and then most of my mixing actually will occur right on the canvas. I just enjoy doing it that way. And I'll start from dark and I'll move into the light. So the dark colors really are just the Van Dyke brown and blue and a little red. And then as I start to lighten that up, I introduce a little more yellow and a little more white. But those are the dark tones that you're kind of seeing now. And then as I move into my lighter colors, I move more into the white and yellow and reds, and then just add minute amounts of blues and Van Dyke as necessary. But I like to kind of soften and mix and blend right as I go on the canvas, and just starting with those dark regions and then working toward the lighter regions. So we'll work around the eye here and into the eyelid, and then down into the chin or the cheek region. So just continuing with this particular process. And if you've not had a chance to view some of my past videos, I actually do go into quite a bit of detail discussing my palette for portrait painting. And so if you want to have a chance to see how I put those colors together and mix those colors, please take a moment and view that. And as usual, the tool I'm using is a 20/0 round brush, and I get a lot of control and detail because it's such a tiny head on this brush, and I use them an enormous amount with this small detail work. And I've got a couple of these brushes I'm using, one for my darks and then one for my lights. That way I don't have to worry about polluting the brush, and I can just jump back and forth. And I really don't use a lot of paint thinner or mineral spirits to clean the brush. I just continually wipe the brush right onto a paper towel and then move into the next pile of paint, and that way it just keeps the paint nice and stiff and thick and creamy, and not really too watered down. I don't really want to have to water down the paint too much if I can help it. And I'm also using my Alkyd oil paints, which are fast drying paints. I will try to paint, I will actually paint all this in one single sitting, wet on wet. And even as I'm using it for the first couple hours, it's pretty pliable, but then it starts to grow tacky. Even on my palette, it'll begin to grow tacky and start to dry pretty quickly. So I have to work fairly fast with it, but I really enjoy it because I can continue to work it. And as I'm not using a lot of paint, by the way, so this isn't very thick, and as a result of that, it will dry very quickly, and then by the end of the day it'll be pretty much dry, and that way I can go back once again. I can go from working wet on wet to working wet on dry, and begin to really start to dry brush blend a lot of color at that point in time. So a little bit later in the painting, as I get closer to the end, by that time the paint is mostly dry, and I'll start to use my glazes and use some of that dry brush blending technique just to kind of put those final strokes to the painting. And but I really enjoy these fast drying paints, and the only caveat is that you just need to kind of work quickly. As I said, you'll have a couple hours of pliability and usability and mixing time, but after a few hours it does begin to grow tacky, in which case I will begin to include a little mineral spirits to sort of start to loosen that up. And but they are great, and within about a week's time I'll let this just dry for about a week, and then it'll be ready to isolate and varnish. And the reason I can wait about a week is just because I'm applying this paint so very thinly, and therefore it will dry really quickly, and it'll begin to crystallize pretty quickly. So that's kind of my method for doing this. But this is, as I mentioned, in commission painting. This one's actually going to be going overseas. I'm going to have to ship it to Germany. So I want to get this done so I can get it hauled off, and so that's kind of why I wanted to use these Alkyd oil paints to kind of speed the whole process up. All right, so I'm continuing to go through here now and kind of finish out these eyes. And then I'll kind of work into the ear region and then start kind of expanding out from there. But once again, it's just a matter of starting in those dark colors and then slowly starting to introduce lighter values. So I've done a number of these Harry Potter style paintings, and they're a lot of fun. They're very popular, and of course, you know, a lot of folks they have been requesting these recently. I actually painted Dobby as another commission a couple of years ago. I don't think I video recorded it at the time, but somebody happened to get on my website and see it and wanted me to kind of recreate it. So, and I kind of wanted to do it a little different than the first time. The first time I did it, it was a lot more kind of cartoonish. In this sense, I wanted to make it a lot more similar to Dobby from the movies, and so I ended up just doing a little search and finding a few video or movie images of Dobby the House Elf, and ended up finding one I thought was appropriate, and just really tried to really color match the colors that I was seeing from the movie photograph, and really take my time to really kind of get it as close to the reference photo as I could. So I wanted to kind of make it more just more, I guess, realistic, if you will, than the first time that I had done this. But just continuing to use these little brushes and just making small little strokes and kind of just softening, you know, no hard lines. I'm softening around the edges as I kind of move along. And I've mentioned before, I don't like to overblend. I think as you begin to overwork and overblend and start to really kind of remove most of your brush strokes, it begins to, I don't know, just kind of lose some of that artsy feel to it. So, you know, I still enjoy blending and softening, but having some very modest brush strokes, I think, will allow to kind of keep that artistic feel about it. I'm using my larger brush. I just have a large flat bristle brush here that I can cover more surface area. What I'm doing here now is I wanted just to block it all in kind of gray tones, which is again just ultramarine blue and Van Dyke brown and some white. And now as it's wet, I can go back over this, adding some of my lighter gray tones here now, and kind of go over that wet underpainting and be able to just get some natural blend. You know, these house elves, they're very wrinkly, and so a lot of wrinkles, and so I'm just trying. I think for me the easiest way to accomplish that is to just kind of do it as a wet on wet, and then just kind of add those darker lines, and then add the highlights, and that way I can kind of soften them and blend them together and achieve that kind of wrinkly effect. Since there's just a whole lot of detail in this particular painting. So we're moving now into the nose region, and just kind of trying to create some three-dimensionality. These house elves have these long noses that kind of arch upward at the end, have these upturned kind of tips to the nose. So what I'm trying to accomplish right now is to give that illusion that he's got this long nose, and that that it's kind of upturned. So, but just slowly kind of introducing some of these lighter tones now, which is just more of the white and yellow and a little red now, kind of creating a bit of a gold color, as the light source will be coming from the right. So I'll just kind of keep jumping around here and kind of tweaking, and I'll lay most of this in. And as I said, I like to kind of approximate a lot of the shadowing and the highlights, but more important for me is really just getting the shapes accurate, get all the lines where I want them, and then I can accomplish most of getting my colors a little more accurate once I start to introduce the dry brush blending, and also, more importantly, the glazes. And so a little bit later at the end of this video, I'll start to introduce those glazes, which really for me is just using my my Alkyd colors. Actually, I think I'm using Liquin Original in this particular instance, and then just creating a really thin, transparent kind of color. And then I'll start to kind of bring some more shadowing in with that, a little more of some crimsons and reds, just to kind of add a little bit of I guess blood to the surface of the skin around the cheeks and the nose region, which is pretty customary to see on any sort of portrait or figure work. So kind of moving down now, kind of starting to get Dobby is kind of coming alive a little bit now as I begin to continue to work this, and going down into the lip region now, and I went ahead and put some alizarin crimson on my palette and mixed that with a little bit of black, just to kind of achieve a nice dark crimson color. For the top lip, there'll be a lot more shadow on the top lip. The bottom lip will be naturally a little more capturing some light, a little lighter. And so I'm just kind of trying to get that worked in here and create these lips. And he's just kind of smirking here, as if he's just a little bit chagrined or something. But I'm going to go ahead and block in really quickly here his shoulder and his neck region. And then while that's wet, again, just continue to start adding in a bunch of the wrinkles and going into that lighter gold mixture. And while it's wet, then start to blend that on. It'll start to pick up some of that underpainting and darken itself naturally. But there's a lot of shadow down in the neck region, and so I didn't really want it to be too strong of a color, but just kind of subtle transitions, and give the indication that there's a lot of wrinkles down into his neck. So just adding those in and softening them and blending them as I go. So continuing just to work this out, and then I'll come back and I'll add some real subtle highlights to that. But right now, again, I'm just kind of being a little careful as I go. You don't want to be too loose and free with this type of work. I tend to find that when I work characters or portraits of people, I'm oftentimes definitely being a lot more careful and trying to get use the smaller brushes and really just take my time, and it's very different for me is when I'm doing oceanscapes or landscapes. I can typically underpaint a lot more loose and free and get things kind of worked in that way, and then slowly transitioned into a little more care and a little more detail. But I don't usually start that way with these types of paintings. So, getting this blocked in, kind of completed and finished here, and like I said, I wanted to work fast. I wanted to get all this done in literally one sitting. And really what I did was I got as much as I could get done with the initial block-in phase and underpainting and some of the modest detail. And then I kind of stepped away for a few hours, let it start to dry, and then I came back a little bit later in the day and then added those final glazes and kind of got this all done in one day. So, but that's how I like to do this, is specifically because of these fast-drying acrylics or fast-drying oils. You definitely want to be pretty efficient with your time, because for me it's a big pet peeve to have to remix and try to color match. It's so easy to just have difficulty color matching once you're trying to remix piles and get them right, kind of like you had them the first time. And for me, that's just a big pet peeve. So I prefer just to get it all done in one setting, and that way when I come back with my glazes, I don't need to be quite as precise, because at that point in time I'm just taking very transparent colors, and I'm beginning to go in and start to adjust my values and tones and colors and so forth. So now I'm getting to that point where mostly getting him kind of blocked in now, and I know at this point that I'm not quite as accurate to the reference photo quite yet, but I'll resolve that issue in a little bit after I start glazing. And that's really kind of my preference on putting these style of paintings together. Really, of course, if you're using traditional oils, you don't need to be nearly as fast. I think I completed this painting in about 5 total hours, 4.5, 5 hours total, spread throughout one day. But if you're working traditional oils, you've got a whole lot longer drying time and blending time, so you could literally come back the next day and your oils would still be pliable enough to keep working, really, if you wanted to do that. But for me, the rationale behind not wanting to use traditional oils is that several weeks need to go by before I can really, several days, honestly, even up to maybe a week if I want to start layering color. And then, of course, allowing that to dry for 5 or 6 months before I could even start glazing it. Just didn't have that luxury with this commission. And nobody wants to have to wait that long. So I was really happy to run across the Alkyd oil paints, which in my opinion is kind of the best of both worlds from acrylics and traditional oils. You can kind of get the virtues of both mediums, and when it comes to commission work, as I said, I can have this fairly dry and ready to go within about a week, and get it isolated and glazed, and I can get it shipped off, and and the client's not having to wait as long, and then I can continue to move on to the next project. So anyway, just kind of working the pillowcase that he's wearing now, and get at that kind of just some basic brush strokes really, and just dry brushing this on. I'll come back a little later and add a little bit more highlight to that. So now I'm starting the glazing process. This is me coming back a couple hours later, and it's dry enough now that I can begin to add these glazes. And I've mixed together Van Dyke brown and some blue and some purple. I went ahead and put a little bit of Dioxazine purple on my palette now, and I like purple. Purple to me is the natural shadow color. So it makes a really nice dark brownish purple color here, and I'm just going through and really now adjusting my colors and really highlighting those shadow regions and those lighter regions now, and getting this a lot more close to the photo. And yes, I could have done this as I was initially working this. I could have mixed my palette with these colors and started this way, but I really like bringing glazes in. I think that it adds just another level of richness to the painting, and kind of gets those colors a little bolder. So I really like glazing, and so it's nice to go ahead and get in here and really start to adjust some things and really kind of bring Dobby to life now. And it's through the use of the shadowing and the highlights that we can really make him three-dimensional and really begin to add a little realism to him. So kind of getting into these areas where I just know there's going to be a lot of shadow here, and just using a really soft, flat bristle brush here, and more or less, you know, I mean, there's not a lot of color. It's got a lot more medium to it than color, just to keep it very, very transparent. And that way it's still picking up the color underneath that, on that underpainting. It's really picking that color up, but also able to change the value. Now I'm beginning to add some crimson colors here into the ears, because I want to kind of show that this is where, you know, some color, maybe some blood vessels are. You know, obviously in the cheek region and the nose, I'm going to add a little crimson there, and just areas that I think that are going to have maybe blood vessels a little closer to the surface of the skin, which is pretty natural to find in those regions. Typically in the forehead, a little bit over the eyes, and definitely in the cheeks and nose and ears, there'll be some more reddish tones in those regions. Now I'm coming back and starting to kind of dry brush, blend some highlights. I've mixed together orange. This time I've got cad orange and actually not cad yellow. I'm using Winsor lemon yellow, which is a little bit brighter than cad yellow. And I've mixed that with some orange and some white to create a really nice, bright, kind of gold color here that I can really go in now and hit that right side of Dobby's head and all those wrinkles and all those areas that are really catching some highlight now. And this is all, like I said, fairly dry now, so I can just come right through here with just a little paint on the brush and really begin to kind of dry brush it on and soften it as I go. Just another great little technique for just adding a little bit more of that three-dimensionality. Kind of going in and glazing into the eyes now. I've picked up a little bit of yellow and a little bit of green that I've mixed earlier with some white, and use some of that Liquid Original, kind of create some translucence into the eye region. And then from this point on, it's really beginning to be just a matter of me really refining now. I'm going through and just kind of stepping back for a moment and looking at regions that I can improve upon, and now I'm really scrutinizing my reference photo and looking for little details. I'm just kind of stumbling on and really adding some brush strokes into the ears, because there's a lot of ridges and blood vessels in the ear region, so I'm really keeping a lot of my brush strokes as I kind of add on to that with this dry brush technique. Kind of improving and refining some of the wrinkles now, and continue to look at bringing in a little bit more shadow. So this is really kind of that refining stage now, and as I kind of get closer and closer now to really matching my photo and color matching as well, making sure that I've got all those shapes correct, and just adding those final brush strokes at this point in time. But with this technique, because it's kind of wet on wet and kind of blend as you go, can literally be done in one sitting. So like I mentioned earlier, this is done in one single day and done within about 4.5-5 hours time. So fairly quick painting to accomplish this, but can be made even quicker because I'm using the Alkyd paints that will dry so fast that I have that luxury to go back and begin to glaze and dry brush blend. So now that I've added that further glazing into the neckline to make it darker, I've got to go back and reintroduce some of these lines, these wrinkles that are in the neck region, kind of bring those back once again, which for me is just I've mixed some of that crimson and some white to kind of create a nice kind of a primrose pink color to bring those lines in. I'm adding some little hair now, so I'm getting to the end now, and I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks for tuning in. Bye now.